Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad you could join me for this self-defense demonstration. I'm sure you will come to find it to be very informational.
Many might be surprised to learn that I have at times needed to engage in hand-to-hand combat. Being the smartest man on the planet has its benefits. However, it also makes me a target for heroes, villains, and criminals alike, who all see me as a threat or an obstacle in their way. To combat this, I have studied and trained in several areas of self-defense, including hand-to-hand combat, martial arts, weapons training, escape and evasion techniques, and more. I aim to be prepared for any unexpected situation or confrontation, as well as to anticipate and diffuse potential threats before they arise. One essential self-defense tool I've learned over the years is the humble wrist lock. Because these moves don't rely so much on strength as on the limits of the human body, they are accessible to just about anyone willing to learn. A wrist lock is typically applied by grabbing the opponent's hand and bending and/or twisting it. Wrist locks are very common in martial arts such as Aikido, Hapkido, and Jujutsu, where they are featured as self-defense techniques. They are also used as submission holds in martial arts such as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, where the most common name is Mão de Vaca, the cow's hand, and catch wrestling. While being an illegal technique in modern Sambo and Judo competitions, it is still practiced in Judo forms of self-defense, Kata, Kodokan, Goshinjutsu. Wrist locks are also widely used as pain compliance holds, often in police, military, and residential treatment centers. It is considered to be a relatively safe technique to practice with a willing opponent, but if applied suddenly and/or forcefully, a wrist lock can cause ligament tears, or possibly even dislocation, or bone fractures. Mixed martial arts organizations usually allow wrist locks, but they are rarely performed as a result of the grappling gloves and wrist wraps typically worn by MMA fighters, which both restrict the movement of the wrist. Wrist locks are seen as being easy to defend against, and often leave the attacker vulnerable to punches and elbow strikes. However, while some may view these sorts of techniques as underhanded, my own experience has shown them to be very effective. By grabbing your opponent's hand and twisting it, you can disable them enough to get yourself out of a bad situation. One excellent technique for gaining control of an opponent is the rear wrist lock. Of course, it's not always easy to get a resisting person into a rear wrist lock. That's why it's critical that this technique be performed correctly. To be effective, you must assume a position of control, while at the same time applying pain compliance techniques. When making the initial contact with your opponent, the first grab is of the utmost importance. Grab your opponent's right wrist with your right hand, or his left wrist with your left hand. Hold on firmly with your thumb placed on the inside of the wrist and your fingers on the hand side. This lets you manipulate the hand while maintaining a grip. Now, pull your other hand up toward your opponent's elbow while keeping your fingers on the inside of the elbow joint. This grip lets you manipulate the opponent's arm behind his back. The hand at the opponent's wrist should be rotating his wrist forward, folding his hand behind his back, and with the help of the other hand, bending his arm. Once the arm is behind his back, there are some important points for maintaining control. Wrist over, wrist up, elbow control, and wrist manipulation control. The further you can pull your opponent's arm across their back, the better. Once the arm is across the back and up, place both of your hands over the back of the opponent's hand. To ensure control, secure your opponent's elbow either low on your sternum or tucked into your armpit, like a football carry. As with most control techniques, it is important to keep a good base when performing the rear wrist lock. Stand with your feet apart and knees bent. This stance will help you stay on your feet, which is much safer than ending up on the ground. In addition, keep your head against the back of your opponent, so you can't be head-butted. When you have gained control of an opponent in a rear wrist lock, head-butting is his or her only attack option. All this being said, we know that not all techniques work on everyone all of the time. If your opponent is extremely aggressive and motivated, you may have to resort to a different technique such as a takedown or disengaging to select another tool. Likewise, if your opponent is inflexible, then you may not be able to gain control because the arm will not go far across the back or sufficiently upward. As with all defensive techniques, it is important to practice the rear wrist lock until it is second nature. This means not only practicing specific techniques, but also practicing disengaging. Many people, because of their pride and their survival mindset, have a difficult time disengaging when someone is resisting. By practicing disengaging and retrieving other tools, you will be more likely to disengage when you are not able to control a resisting opponent, which could be critical in your ability to prevail in the confrontation. Thank you all for listening to this demonstration. And remember, having a strong body is only secondary to having a strong mind.